Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel Contracts Unfolded. Now, if we have been into a contract negotiation, you knew about this moment. Everything is going great, the commercial terms have been agreed, the scope is clear, and then somebody says, let's discuss about the limitation of liability clause. And suddenly everyone becomes uncomfortable. The business team starts worrying about the exposure, the founders start worrying about worst case scenarios, and lawyers start digging deep into the numbers because everyone knows this clause is important, but very few knows how a limitation of liability clause should be structured. And in this video we are going to cover exactly the same thing. So first, let's understand what is a limitation of liability clause. At its core, this clause answers one simple question: if something goes wrong in the contract, what is the maximum amount one party can be forced to pay? Now, without this clause in the contract, this liability or this amount exposure can be unlimited. And even a single or a small breach or problem in the contract can cause a great financial exposure to the other party. And business teams don't want that. Therefore, they already agree in advance. Okay, so if something goes wrong in the contract, this is the outer limit out of which we won't be able to pay you anything. And this whole conversation is captured in the limitation of liability clause. But not all kind of liability are equal, and therefore we see the parties agreeing to three kind of liability. So let's discuss them one by one. And the first liability is a normal liability cap. So this cap is for ordinary contractual breaches or routine contractual breaches. The examples could be delay in performance, minor service label failures, or minor non-compliance with the contractual terms or contracts. Now these are normal business risks, and therefore the parties agrees to a normal cap. And this cap is commonly linked to the contract value or the amount paid by one party to the other in the last 12 months. So even if the loss is higher, the liability stops at the amount agreed by the parties. And this prevents business from unlimited or big financial exposures for routine contractual breaches. Now, for high risk obligations or more serious obligations or obligations which can cause legal or reputational damage to the parties agrees for a super cap. Now, the examples of events for which the parties agrees for a super cap can be breach of confidentiality, data protection obligations, or IP infringement. For such events, the contract says the normal will cap will not apply, rather a much higher cap will apply, which is generally called a super cap. And super cap is linked to two times the contract value or three times the contract value or a certain fixed value identified by the party. So let's say the contract value was 1 lakh rupees, but for super cap the parties agree to a fee of 5 lakh rupees. And the idea of putting a super cap is very simple because the risks are more serious now. Therefore, the financial protection needs to be much stronger. Now, there can be a third scenario. Let's say some fraudulent act by a party, or a grossful negligent act, or a willful misconduct act by one party. So for these kind of acts, the parties decides that there should be no cap upon the liability exposure which one party needs to pay to the other. And the idea for that is very simple. For intentional wrongdoings, why should the party accept to a liability cap? And therefore, in such scenarios, there is no financial ceiling or no financial limit to the liability, because If the loss is large, the liability should be equally large to cover those losses. And this is exactly where the lawyers should be very smart and should be capable to negotiate the liability exposure cap. So this is all for this video. If you find the video helpful, then please share it with someone who deals with contracts. And thank you so much for your time for watching this video. We'll meet in the next one. Thanks again.